What drives a man to cradle his daughters in what appears to be tender photos, only to commit the most unthinkable betrayal? What happened behind closed doors that led Chris Watts to destroy his own family? And how was the truth finally uncovered? In this video, I'll take you through the Watts family tragedy. Who Shanann, Bella, and Celeste really were, the double life of Chris Watts, the horrifying crime scene, the tangled web of lies, and finally, how justice eventually caught up with Chris. Stay with me until the end, because what really happened at the end is both shocking and devastating. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, so you'll be the first to be notified when I post another true crime story. Shanann Watts was a devoted wife and mother. At 34, she poured her heart into raising her two little girls, Bella and Celeste, and was excited to welcome a third child, a baby boy she had already named Nico. To her friends, Shanann was vibrant, loving, and full of hope. On the outside, the Watts family looked perfect, but behind closed doors, cracks were forming. On the morning of August 13, 2018, Shanann Watts returned to her home in Frederick, Colorado. She was tired but happy, having just come back from a work trip to Arizona. Inside the house were her husband, Chris, and their two little girls, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy she and Chris had already named Nico. She adored being a mother. Her social media overflowed with photos of family life, bedtime stories, birthday cakes, and the excitement of welcoming a new child. To her friends, Shanann was warm, devoted, and someone who gave everything for her children. Bella and Celeste were bundles of energy, with nicknames and personalities that filled the home with life. Bella was curious and full of imagination. Celeste, sweet and affectionate, loved clinging to her mother. Together, they were the center of Shanann's world. To anyone looking in from the outside, this was the picture of a happy family. And Chris Watts? He appeared to be the steady husband and father. Quiet, hard-working, a provider for his growing family. He worked in the oil fields, and neighbors saw him as a reserved but caring man. On the surface, Chris played his role well. But beneath that facade, a darker truth was taking shape. The family was drowning in financial troubles, with debts and a past bankruptcy weighing heavily on them. Even more devastating, Chris was having an affair with a coworker, a woman who later said she believed he was planning a new life with her. The cracks in the marriage were widening, though Shanann's friends had no idea just how deep the fissures ran. When Shanann missed a doctor's appointment the morning after she returned home, alarms went off. She never ignored calls or skipped something as important as a prenatal visit. Her car was still in the garage. Her purse, phone, and keys were inside the house. Her wedding ring was found abandoned on the bed. These were things Shanann would never leave behind. When friends called the police, Chris seemed cooperative at first. He told officers he didn't know where his wife or daughters had gone. He even appeared on local news cameras, pleading for their safe return. But his words didn't match his body language. He was too calm, too detached. Investigators noticed. When Chris agreed to take a polygraph test, he failed it. Under pressure, the truth began to crack open. On that fateful morning in the bedroom, Shanann confronted Chris about his affair and their failing marriage, which led to an argument, and in the heat of that argument, Shanann told Chris he would never see his children again. In that moment, Chris climbed on top of her and began to strangle her. He held on until she stopped breathing. Their daughters were still in the house as this happened. Afterward, he wrapped Shanann's body in a bedsheet, dragged her downstairs, and loaded her into the back of his work truck. Somehow, Bella and Celeste woke up during the chaos. He put them in the back seat of the same truck, each clutching a blanket and, in Celeste's case, a stuffed animal. They had no idea what had just happened to their mother. Chris drove nearly an hour to a remote oil site owned by his company. Once there, he pulled Shanann's body from the truck and dug a shallow grave in the dirt. He laid her inside and covered her hastily. His daughters were still alive, sitting in the truck, watching. Then came the most chilling part of all. Chris turned to Celeste first. Using a small Yankees blanket, he pressed it against her face until she stopped breathing. He carried her body to one of the massive oil tanks and forced her inside. Bella, terrified, had seen what happened to her sister. She asked her father if the same thing would happen to her. Chris said nothing. He used another blanket and smothered her too. Bella fought back, crying out, "Daddy, no!" Her last words. When she was gone, he placed her body into a separate oil tank. With his wife buried in the dirt and his daughters hidden inside the tanks, Chris drove away, leaving behind a crime scene almost too cruel to imagine. The discovery shocked not only the small town of Frederick but the entire nation. The stench of oil, the shallow grave in the dirt, the silence that replaced the giggles of two little girls. Every detail of the crime sent waves of grief and disbelief through the community. The man who had seemed like a loving father had become something else entirely. Why would a father destroy the very family he had built? Why would a man who tucked his daughters into bed one night choose to silence them forever the next morning? These questions became the heart of the investigation, and they still echo in the minds of everyone who followed the case. Psychologists who later studied his behavior noted how eerily flat his emotions seemed. Chris did not cry when describing what he had done. He didn't rage. He didn't break down. He delivered the details with the coldness of someone recounting a routine task. This emotional void led experts to believe he might have narcissistic or sociopathic traits. A man so consumed by his own desires that his wife and children became obstacles to be erased. The motive, in its simplest form, was selfishness. Chris wanted a life without responsibility. He wanted freedom, perhaps to pursue his new relationship, perhaps to escape financial collapse, perhaps simply because he no longer valued the family he once helped create. But the truth is, no motive could ever justify what he had done. The brutality was too great, the betrayal too deep. The grief reached far beyond Colorado. Across the country, people mourned for Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. Online communities poured out support, but they also dissected every detail, searching for meaning in a crime that seemed senseless. Many pointed to the affair as the spark, others to financial stress, still others to a hidden darkness inside Chris that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to surface. For Shanann's family, the weight of loss was unbearable. They had lost a daughter, grandchildren, and an unborn baby in one blow. Their lives became a haunting mixture of sorrow and questions. How could they ever trust again? How could they ever find peace knowing the killer was not a stranger, but the very person who should have protected them? So the trial that followed would bring answers, but it would not bring healing. When Chris Watts was finally brought to court, the weight of the evidence against him left little room for doubt. In November 2018, just 3 months after the murders, he stood before the judge and entered a guilty plea to 5 counts of first-degree murder. 2 for each of his daughters, because they were children under the age of 12, 1 for Shanann, plus charges for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy and for tampering with human remains. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. The courtroom was heavy with silence as Shanann's family delivered their victim impact statements. Shanann's father, Frank Razusek, described his daughter as a loving mother, full of life, who deserved so much more than the fate she suffered. Shanann's brother broke down, calling Chris a monster. The judge, visibly shaken, told Chris his crimes were the most inhumane and vicious he had ever seen in his career. The sentence was clear: 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 48 years. Chris Watts would die in prison. But even with justice served, the community struggled to heal. Friends who once saw Chris and Shanann as the perfect couple admitted to doubting their own instincts, asking themselves if they could truly ever know another person. Neighbors described the Watts home, once filled with children's laughter, as haunted by silence. For Shanann's family, grief was a constant companion. Her parents said the pain of losing Sean and Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico was indescribable, like living in a nightmare that never ends. The case sparked widespread discussions about hidden domestic violence, the kind that hides behind smiling family photos and cheerful social media posts. Experts emphasized how abusers can mask their true selves until the breaking point, and how important it is to recognize signs of control, secrecy, or emotional withdrawal. For many, the Watts murders became a chilling reminder that evil does not always come from strangers in the shadows. Sometimes it comes from the people closest to us. Even now, years later, questions remain. What exactly went through Chris's mind as he ended the lives of his wife and children? Was it truly about an affair or money or something darker inside him? Could anyone have stopped him if they had seen the signs earlier? The full truth may never be known, and perhaps that is what makes the case so haunting. It leaves behind unanswered questions that refuse to fade. The legacy of Sean and Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico lives on in the memories of those who loved them, and in the countless people who were touched by their story. Their tragedy continues to echo across communities and platforms, serving both as a warning and as a reminder of the fragility of trust. And now I'll leave you with this. What do you think drove Chris Watts to commit such an unthinkable act? Was it desperation, selfishness, or something deeper that none of us can fully understand? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories, because behind every headline lies a story that demands to be told.